So our next speaker is the founder and CEO of RedPulse, a China market intelligence platform combining traditional research techniques with advanced technologies to solve information overload. Our speaker is Jonathan Ha, and he studied computer engineering and economics at UPenn. So give it up for Jonathan Ha.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jonathan Ha, and thank you for the introduction. And first off, I want to thank NEO for giving me the opportunity to speak today. Really excited to see everyone come out today. San Francisco is actually my hometown. I was born and raised in the Bay Area, so this is a bit of a homecoming for me. So it's pretty excited to be here. So let's get along with it. RedPulse. What is RedPulse? We are a tokenized research ecosystem for China. This is China. And so is this. But these days, China isn't building any more walls. It's building bridges, belts, and roads. So for those that have heard of the Belt and Road Initiative, it is the largest economic initiative in history. And it is China's program to expand its economy beyond its own borders to the rest of the world. It impacts 75% of the world's population, incorporates 65% of the world's natural resources, and also has earmarked a minimum of $8 trillion for investment. It's a really big deal. China's economy is also already second largest in the world by GDP, soon to be first. So for those financial institutions and corporates looking at China, it is the opportunity of the century. Now, at the same time, China represents immense risk. For those people that are not familiar with China markets, it can be a very difficult market to navigate. And for those that have that informational advantage, they do better than the rest. So this informational disconnect represents a huge opportunity for those platforms that can bridge the divide. Taking a quick look at how information has evolved over the past several decades, we start with what we call the age of aggregation, age of access, I should say, in the 1990s, where just having access to information was doing quite well. Access to consistent market data, share flow data, volume data, you were already ahead of the game. Fast forward to the 2000s, what we call the age of aggregation. This is where financial platforms such as Bloomberg had an innovation to aggregate all this information onto one platform. So information that includes research, news, analysis, pricing data, even messaging, all into one platform, all at your fingertips. But that in itself also created its own problem, the problem of information overload. When you have all of the world's information at your fingertips, now you don't know what information is actually relevant to you. So what we're missing today is context. How do you have the context to figure out what is relevant to you? And for us, context can be broken down into scale and relevance. A couple very well-known platforms that we've mapped out on this mapping. And a few of these I'm sure you are all very familiar with, some big names at the bottom left-hand corner. And this isn't to say that they don't do a good job. They do a fantastic job of covering global markets. But when it comes to covering China, they come up short. And perhaps not so surprisingly, the platforms that do a fantastic job of covering China are Chinese. And one in particular that I want to highlight is WeChat. So much the same as how Facebook has become a very, very common platform for people to draw information from, news, what have you. WeChat, in a similar fashion, has also become a go-to source of information for people in China. And the reason why is because of the socialized element. Because if you are faced with so much information constantly bombarding your inbox, your cell phone, and you're faced with deciding what information should I listen to, you often turn to the information that your friends give you, your colleagues give you, your trusted contacts, right? So it's that socialized element of being able to vet information that's quite important nowadays, and something that RedPulse also seeks to do. And how do we do that? RedPulse is creating an open research ecosystem, inviting outside contributors, such as independent analysts, industry experts, and academics to share their own views and analysis on China markets on our platform and get paid for it. We've introduced our own cryptocurrency, the RPX, RedPulse token, and this helps us to solve a couple things. First of all, it helps us to solve the cold start problem of scaling a new platform from scratch. It also allows us to control the monetary economics of the token supply itself, and that is quite important. I'll explain in just a moment what that means. We also have two business models. The first that I explained earlier, consisting of an open research platform, inviting outside contributors to share their ideas and get paid for it. The second, also very importantly, recognizing that financial institutions, while they may not be willing to pay for generic research any longer, they are willing to pay for custom insights and custom research. And as we scale both the research contributor side and consumer side, we have this opportunity to bridge that gap, connect those experts with those consumers of research. All of this is tied together by the RPX, the RedPulse token. As many of you know, we did a successful ICO on NEO a couple months ago. We're also very well capitalized now to focus on our next steps. So a quick thought on sharing economies. This is something that I want to focus a little bit more time on today. So RedPulse, of course, we're creating this sharing economy for research, but what does sharing economy mean? Sharing economies are not new. If you think back when people lived in villages, groups of people, not more than 30, 40, 50 people, all living together in the same close quarters. And what they did was they shared common goods, common utilities, things such as a water well they would share, things such as knowledge, things such as protection. So it would be a few people within the population, within the village, that were better at those things, that would provide this as a common good for everybody else. And back then, when the population was quite small, villages of 50 people, 60 people, that was fine, that was no problem. But as the population started to scale, villages became cities, cities became megacities, states, countries. People became less comfortable with sharing things with people that they don't know. There also became what we call a free rider problem. Many of these people were less willing to put in the same amount of contribution as the benefit that they were taking out. Very problematic. And the solution to that was to use money in the traditional sense as a transactional medium. So by introducing this money layer, people were able to be compensated for the things that they're putting into society. And the people that wanted to benefit from it, of course, had to pay into that. But it started to lose the meaning of sharing, lose that community feeling, lose the ability to participate in this common ecosystem. Much more transactional at this point. But if we're able to introduce another layer of utility tokens, then something interesting happens. With the utility token, we can then inject inflation via minting of new tokens. And why? It's actually for a very good purpose. By introducing a little bit of inflation on a continuous basis, we can use these new tokens as a source of capital to pay and compensate those people that are continuously contributing into the system, thereby not requiring the majority of people to pay anything at all. Seems to be free, actually. But what actually is happening here is the inflation acts as a tax on everyone, eliminating the free rider problem, allowing everyone to participate and benefit from the good or shared utilities, yet at the same time not requiring people to pay up front for it. Really powerful stuff. And that's something that I think cryptocurrency can introduce to a lot of different business models and create this idea of a very scalable sharing economy. Now, bringing it back to RedPulse, this is exactly what we've done. We start with the RPX tokens in circulation. We have the two business models, the open research platform, the expert network, and two types of users, producers and consumers. Introducing inflation, starting with 10% per year, but of course decaying down quite quickly after that. We're able to use that inflation, that source of new tokens, as the payoff to those contributors of new works into the system. The inflation then, of course, goes to the producers. Producers can use RPX tokens to purchase premium publishing tools, access to other data sets, so on and so forth. For the most part, research consumers don't have to pay anything at all for this common good. If they so choose to pay for premium services such as real-time access, API access, they can do so. And of course, it would be denominated in RPX. Now, where it gets even more interesting is, as I mentioned before, when we have scale on both the producers and consumer side, we can then introduce a new business model called the expert network. Those financial institutions that are interested in requesting custom insights, something that they are very willing to pay for still, can do so on our platform. And we use AI-based matching to match the right experts to those requests for research and charge a small commission on every transaction. We've also been listed recently on several exchanges: KuCoin, TDAX, Huobi, soon to be OK Exchange, and CoinRail, our very first one in Korea. So exciting stuff. Liquidity is very important, but I should also mention that for us as a project team, as a company, our main priority is platform development. And we know that's actually going to be building the ecosystem that RPX is being used within. So that is RedPulse. We are creating the world's first sharing economy for research. Thank you. So I think we have time for a couple questions from the audience. Be happy to answer any questions you guys might have.
How is that different from GLG export network?
Very good question. So for those that aren't aware of GLG, they're the world's largest expert network. And they have a very long-standing business model where they essentially connect financial institutions such as hedge funds, private equity firms, to subject matter experts that these hedge funds and other firms need access to. You know, whether it's them looking at a particular deal, investment, they need to better understand the space before moving forward, and who better to ask than an expert within that field. Now, we differ from them in a number of ways, because GLG and others like them, they are quite traditional in how they are connecting to people, and also traditional in the information transfer. It's phone calls. So they help schedule phone calls with experts and, let's say, a hedge fund. And in doing so, it gives them the opportunity to ask questions, right? But at the same time, there is no deliverable. They have to be preparing these questions beforehand and then scribbling down notes very quickly, you know, as they're having this conversation with these experts. So from an information transfer standpoint, it's not very efficient. What RedPulse provides as a platform, as a service, is the ability to frame what sort of information you're looking for, what sort of analysis, what sort of study you're looking for, almost like a consulting project, a mini consulting project. And the deliverable is then transferred via our platform to the hedge fund. And there's a couple of things that actually are advantageous when you use that approach. First, again, as I mentioned, it is a deliverable. You do get something in your hand that you can point to and say, you know, this is the study that I commissioned, and it's something that is quite helpful for me to defend my thinking when I have this new investment strategy to the investment committee, for example, or to my corporate strategy team. The second reason why it's useful is that it's a system of record. Expert networks such as GLG and others, they've recently come under fire for essentially facilitating, not intentionally of course, but facilitating insider trading. So the benefit of us having this system of record is that we're able to more credibly demonstrate to not only the contributors, but also the requesters of information, that this is a platform where all of that information that's transferred is of record and available if we need to upon request from, let's say, regulators for compliance reasons. So that's a much stronger deterrent for these contributors not to share anything that might be considered to be sensitive or confidential in nature. And the other reason it's quite useful is because for the hedge fund's perspective, their lawyers also are always a little bit nervous as to what information is being shared over a phone call, right? So they can also be checking that all the information that they're receiving is compliant. And we're also using our own natural language processing engine to flag any sort of information, any sort of keywords that may be sensitive. And so that's something that we can also block.
Any plans to extend outside of China?
Absolutely, yeah. So China, the reason we chose China is because from an information perspective, it's very asymmetric. So people in China that are pretty plugged into markets there, they know pretty much a lot of what's going on. What information is good, what sources are credible. But that information familiarity drops off a cliff the moment you step outside of China. Especially if you don't know how to read and write Chinese, it's very difficult to bridge that divide. But at the same time, we recognize the business model that we're establishing isn't only applicable to China, it's actually applicable to any market. So we chose China because it's low-hanging fruit. There's a huge demand for better China market information that doesn't yet exist. So we wanted to build our business, demonstrate value, demonstrate that this model works first in China, and then expand beyond that. Any other questions? No? Well, thank you again. Really an honor to be here at Neo DevCon San Francisco. Appreciate it. Thanks, guys.